In the long night of the Antarctic winter, a photographer's flash illuminates a haunting sight. The year is 1915, and a British ship, the Endurance, is trapped in a vast sea of ice. The rare photographic images record for the ages an extraordinary true-life drama. 28 men stranded at the end of the earth, beyond all hope of rescue. The story of these men and their leader, Sir Ernest Shackleton, is a saga of heroism and human endurance that will forever be regarded as one of the greatest adventures of all time. Born in Ireland, already a British national hero, Ernest Shackleton was a man of towering ambition and boundless optimism. He saw his expedition as the last great polar journey of the heroic age of exploration. By dog sled, he would travel 1,500 miles across the continent. But to reach the starting point at Vassal Bay, he would have to navigate the uncharted waters of the Weddell Sea. Soon, an increasingly dense jigsaw puzzle of ice floes slowed the ship. But the Endurance, named from Shackleton's family motto, "By endurance we conquer," was one of the strongest wooden ships of the day, with a bow 4 feet thick. But as they headed deeper into the Weddell Sea, ice compressed around the ship. To save fuel, Shackleton stopped the engines. When the temperature dropped sharply, it sealed their fate. The Endurance was frozen solid in a sea of ice. As spring approached and the ice continued to move, it did not free the Endurance, but instead began to crush her. The ship that had been their home and hope for 326 days was now gone. It was their darkest moment. Twice they made exhausting efforts to march to safety, hauling the lifeboats, but the ice proved impassable. They could only hope that the ice floe beneath them would drift closer to land. Captain Worsley calculated they had drifted 600 miles toward the Antarctic Peninsula and islands at its tip. They hoped to reach supplies stored at Paulet Island. Their last possible landfall was Elephant Island. The men had been trapped on ice for 15 months. But their real struggle was just beginning. Shackleton ordered his men onto a small floe. The meager comforts of this floating camp would prove the last of their voyage. On the fourth day, under hazy sunshine, Worsley balanced against the mast and took the first navigational sight the weather had allowed. Not a single mile had been gained. Instead, the currents had carried them backwards 30 miles. They had spent 7 fearful days on the open sea, 170 days drifting on a floe of ice, and 497 days since last setting foot on land. But this remote island offered no hope of rescue. Shackleton decided on a desperate gamble. He ordered McNeish to strengthen the largest lifeboat and add a sheltering deck. Skillfully, the carpenter prepared the battered boat for a long voyage. Shackleton would try the impossible, an 800-mile sail in a lifeboat across the roughest seas on Earth, back to the whaling stations of South Georgia, the only direction permitted by winds and currents. In the 22-foot lifeboat named the James Caird, Shackleton and 5 others set out. In the years to come, their voyage in the Caird would be judged one of the greatest open boat journeys ever accomplished. "17 days after leaving Elephant Island, they spotted a small, sheltered cove. But their boat was too damaged to go further. And the nearest whaling station was on the opposite coast across treacherous glaciers and mountains. Shackleton had no choice but to attempt crossing the uncharted interior on foot. They carried just 3 days' provisions, 2 compasses, a rope, and a carpenter's adze to be used as an ice axe. They had no idea what perils lay ahead. No one had ever made this crossing of nearly 30 miles over rugged crevasses and peaks. On the second morning, after 27 hours of climbing, Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean struggled up a steep slope. They believed that across a range of mountains to the east were the whaling stations of Stromness Bay. Shackleton and his men were led by an old Norwegian whaler to the station manager's home, their faces gray with blubber smoke, hair matted with salt. "Who are you?" asked the manager. The man said quietly, "My name is Shackleton." The manager turned away and wept. The worst was finally over for Shackleton, but his every thought was with the men he left behind. Then, on August 30th, 1916, they sighted a ship headed toward them. When the boat was within hearing distance, they called out in unison, Shackleton anxiously counted the figures on the beach. He turned to Worsley. "They're all there, Skipper. They're all safe." Not a single life had been lost. The story of Shackleton and his men is an epic of the human spirit, of 27 men driven bravely by the will to live, of one leader determined heroically to save them all, no matter what.